Welcome to part 2 of Pivoting on Research. Our first guest is Brian Rue. He is the Associate Director for Risk Management, Compliance, and Privacy within the Information Security and Privacy Office at Florida State University. He has been involved in university projects, including the development of an IT risk management program, writing the university's first privacy policy, and participating in payment card industry data security standards. Brian, just to open up, as faculty move their research to a remote format, what security considerations should they be keeping in mind?
So the key security considerations are the liability that you as a researcher assume when you move that research out of the FSU campus environment to your home network environment. And you need to take into account the considerations of privacy and security controls that need to be in place. Because again, there's a liability issue in you as the data steward have to have in place to make sure that your research is protected adequately and the privacy of that research is protected. One of the keys you take a look at is the classification of the data that you're dealing with. At Florida State, we have 3 classifications. We have protected, private, and public. Now, the research you have may be public, whereas the security controls that need to be in place are not as thorough as you would need if you had protected research. So protected research would be research that has either a contractual obligation that is in the contract or the grant, you protect the information adequately, or there is some type of intellectual property component of the research you're working on for the university that needs to be protected. And so that's where you need to decide when you do the research at home, how you do it in an adequately protected manner to protect the confidentiality of the information, the integrity, and the availability of the information. So when you bring your laptop home, like I did from work, we have built-in support from our CTS group to make sure that the antivirus software, the anti-malware software is up to date, that any security patches for applications or the operating system are sent out and updated properly. And we have the ability to use VPN connections to the university to ensure that our information is encrypted as it goes across the networks. And that's important in a home network in that at home, it's not necessarily a situation where you're a system administrator or somebody at your house is a systems administrator, more than likely, to update your Linksys or your Netgear router with the latest security patches. So to counter for that possible issue with lack of updated equipment, we use a VPN. And one of the VPNs we have on campus is the Cisco AnyConnect VPN. And that VPN is loaded on the majority of FSU tagged machines, which gives you the ability to create an encrypted tunnel to whatever resource you're connecting to inside of your network. So it's just an added layer of security for your research. So that's the communication side of the house. Using a VPN is pretty important as far as controlling that information flowing across the internet back to either campus or to whatever research associates you're working with. The second issue is storage of the information on your machine. And again, we kind of fall back to the antivirus, anti-malware software protecting that information on your machine. In addition, there are other security controls in place that your local administrator should have to harden your device to make sure that it's less likely to be hacked or that you're less susceptible to malware being introduced on your machine. So that goes back to also using FSU email. Our FSU email is protected with something called Proofpoint, which looks at information or messages coming into our system to ensure they're not infected with malware or any kind of virus applications before they're put in your email box. That's not the case with Gmail necessarily, or Hotmail, or any other mail program you might be using that doesn't have any kind of protection in place like that. So it's important that you use the FSU email, especially if you're working with protected information. So let me kind of talk about protected information a little bit. So in research, you could be using student data. If you are, there's the potential that that student data is protected under FERPA. There's the potential for using patient health information that has some type of HIPAA requirement for security and privacy controls. There's Gramm-Leach-Bliley if you're using data from the financial aid office. And again, contractually, you have NIST 800-171 for certain Department of Defense research. And we have other contractual obligations that may be in place. In fact, we just saw one where a contract came in for a research project and they wanted to use the state rule on security controls, which we'd never seen before. So it's important to understand the classification of the information you're working with. And so in that regard, on your machine, your FSU tag machine, there may be certain controls set up by your systems administrators to encrypt that information, although that is not widely done across the university. But I will say that that's an important step in protecting the information, especially if the device is lost or stolen. Now, one thing to take into consideration, if you move that data to a bring your own device situation, you have now assumed the liability for protecting that information on your home device. And so it's important to understand that if something were to happen where that information was hacked or an unauthorized person gained access to it, there could be some repercussions within the university as far as the data properly. And one of the issues that we have with bring your own device is we don't know if the operating system's updated with the latest security patches. We don't understand if the latest malware, anti-malware and antivirus applications are being used on your machine. We don't know if there are issues with multiple people using the device in the house. So if you let your son or daughter use it for online learning, and then you're doing information that is deemed protected, there could be a conflict of interest in that situation. And that goes for working with protected information on your machine. You have to remember, if that's the case, you have to understand to see that information. And in a household environment, that means basically vetting your family to try to seclude yourself if you're working with protected information, to not accidentally spill that information while you're doing your research project in a home environment.
And talking about the VPNs, are those only for university computers? Can they be used on personal computers?
Unfortunately, the way the university VPN is set up right now, it has to be an FSU tag machine to be registered to use the VPN facilities. You can go to vpn.fsu.edu on any machine, but that doesn't guarantee, that's only guaranteeing that your browser session is VPN, not necessarily any other like mail or any other transmissions that are being conducted during that period. So that's where you need to talk to your systems administrators to find out what kind of support they'll provide to make sure that that Cisco AnyConnect is a. Now, is it an additional control that takes a little bit of getting used to? Yes, because every time you have to log into the VPN. It's not automatic. So there's a little bit of an extra manual step involved versus just automatically opening your machine up, booting it up, and thinking you're in the VPN already.
How often should a faculty researcher be on the VPN and using it while they're at
Well, I think
home?
it's contingent upon the classification of the research they're working on. So if they're working on private or protected research, classified, protected, or private, then they should be working off of a VPN. If it's public research, I'd say it's okay not to VPN, although the fact that the one thing about public research, and we see this often when we've done audits and risk assessments, researchers feel, hey, this is public information. I really don't care what happens to it. I don't care who sees it. It's public. Well, what we counter is there's the integrity of that CIA that I talked about. So you still have in place, maintain the integrity of that public data so that when you're working your research projects, that you lessen the chance of somebody seeding that research database with unauthorized information that could actually ruin your research project. So integrity is still important, even if it's public information. So using the VPN for the public information, that's not a bad idea. Again, we don't know as FSU what your home network, the security of your home network. And so it's a precaution to take by using the VPN to ensure that the controls that FSU normally has in place on campus are transferred to your local device, as far as protecting the communication of information between devices.
When you talked about CIA, integrity was the I. Could you tell us a little bit more about the rest of that acronym?
All right, confidentiality would be how confidential does that information need to be? If it's private or protected, obviously the university doesn't want that information leaked out in an unauthorized fashion. So confidentiality just means maintaining the confidential nature of the information that you're working with. The integrity, again, deals with the structure of that information and making sure there's not an unauthorized change to that information that would somehow cause an issue with, in this case, the research project that you're working on. And availability means that you've got everything up to date so that you are less likely to be hit by something that would cause a denial of service. And that would be malware, that would be ransomware, that would be anything that could come through a system, generally coming through either by website or via email, that would cause your computer to then act in an erratic manner and not allow you to access your computer resources. And again, that's why it's important to use the FSU email versus your home email, because we have quite a few protections in place to limit the ability of people to push malware and ransomware through to our end users. Okay, so there's a question here as far as PhD students don't get a computer. So in that case, you need to work with your system administrator to find out if there are options for you, VPN options that might be available either locally or through ITS. Unfortunately, I am not a VPN expert, so I can't tell you what those options might be, but definitely the systems administrator for your local university unit is going to be a good starting spot, especially if you have concerns and you voice those to those people, and hopefully they'll come up with a solution for you.
Wonderful. And Brian's going to stick around for questions as well. I'm going to turn it real quickly to Megan Debbio. She's the ITS Marketing Communications Manager at Florida State University. And Megan has some information about what other sorts of tools ITS has available. Now, Megan, there are a lot of tools you offer for the entire university. What are some of those tools that you offer for faculty researchers?
Yeah, we have a bunch of tools available. And the thing to keep in mind is I'll go through a few of them, but you can find all of them on our website. So its.fsu.edu. I'll drop the link in the chat in a minute. And you can go through and you can see what we have available and what might work for you. Some of the ones that kind of stand out to me that I know some other researchers have been interested in, we have something called the ITS Software Store. So if there's a particular piece of software that you need, and we have a lot of stuff that's available for free or deeply discounted. So if you don't want to pay those crazy prices that might come if you order it directly from the software provider, you can go to our software store, and we have, I'm sure everybody's aware, you can get Microsoft, the whole Microsoft Office suite free of charge. So everybody should be set up with that. If you don't already have that, for sure, go download that. Then we have a lot of really specialized software, such as SPSS for statistical analysis. We also have a tool called Vivo that has been really popular. That's great if you're doing a lot of qualitative data analysis. And we have Endnote. I know some researchers use that if they need to reference any, include any references in a bibliography. That's another tool that's available through the software store. And we also have some of the things that Brian was mentioning. If you need to get an antivirus, we have Norton Antivirus available through the ITO software store. So a lot of everything from tool-wise software that you can use to the security side of things, the antivirus and stuff like that. So lots of software available in the software store. Definitely check it out, see if there's something that might fit your research needs that you can get at a discount. We also offer some things straight up free through our website. You have links to stuff like Qualtrics, which is an online survey tool. So if you're doing any type of research, you need to put together some sort of survey or other data collection tool, Qualtrics can help with that. We have OneDrive, which is available through the Microsoft Office suite. So that package that everybody gets free, the Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all the standard ones. OneDrive is also another Microsoft Office tool that all university students and employees have access to 5 terabytes of storage. And this is cloud storage, encrypted storage, good stuff to use if you're saving anything personally. We also have FSU Dropbox. So if you need to share files, it's different than the standard Dropbox that you might think of. We have a lot of different security controls in place with our FSU Dropbox. So if you need to maybe transfer something to another researcher, that's an option that's available out there for you. We also have another really cool tool if you're in the MyFSU portal. Not sure if this applies to anyone, but it's called the Scientific Equipment Search Tool. So if you think of MyFSU portal, the quick links over on the left-hand side, there's a research dropdown, and you can choose this scientific equipment search. And what that does is, let's say you're working on a project or you're putting together a grant, and you know you need the XYZ telescope or the XYZ microscope or some really expensive piece of equipment that you might not want to buy straight out. You can see what other researchers might have that available that you can borrow from on campus and then save money or use it for your research. So that's a really neat tool that we put together where you can just go on and search and kind of connect with other researchers. And then the last thing that I'll mention is the Research Computing Center. So we have a team of people that are dedicated to high performance computing. So if you're doing any really compute intensive research, they're there for you. They can help you set up your computer environment. They can get you set up with software. They have a lot of different storage options, either if you need to store something long-term or if you need somewhere to store something as you're working on research. If you have like high throughput computing and a lot of data coming in, they have storage options available for you there as well. And a really great thing that they do is consulting. So if all those words are Greek to you and you're like, I don't know what any of these things are, they can talk you through it and they can set up the environment for you and figure out exactly what you need computing wise to get your research done.
That's wonderful. And some of the services that you mentioned earlier, things like the antivirus software and Vevo, Endnote, I know we have some graduate student researchers here as well. Are those tools that they have access to, or is that specifically for faculty?
You would have to go into the software store and it would depend on your affiliation. Certain tools are available to everyone. I don't know off the top of my head where like Endnote lies. I know stuff like Norton Antivirus and stuff like that is available to everybody, whether you're a student or an employee. And SPSS the same. I'm not positive on Endnote, but once you go into the store, you will see whatever is available to you based on your affiliation.
I see we have a question in the chat. Beth asks, does the equipment tool have all equipment or just equipment that has been purchased since that database was created?
I believe they backloaded, I would not go so far to say all equipment. because it's also a tool that we're trying to promote. You know, some people might not know that they can put their equipment in there, but there's a hefty amount of stuff in there. And I know they did kind of like backdate it to some extent, and to start the database, they got some equipment loaded in there. So it's not comprehensive, but it's a good place to start.
Is that a volunteer basis? If you're a faculty researcher and you have this equipment, do you have the option to share it to that database?
Yes. As far as ITS, we built the platform, and then it's really managed by researchers and whoever wants to add equipment to the database.
That's great. Is that also on the ITS service website?
No, that's one of the weird ones that we need to improve. We need to fix that. You wouldn't necessarily find it through our website currently. You would have to go to My PCI portal and the quick links over on the left-hand side. There's a research section. If you click that drop down, so portal, quick links, research, and you'll see it there.
I'd love to open it up for more questions for both Brian and Megan. Feel free to write it in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question that way, please feel free.
Megan, this is Bob Reeser from the College of Ed. You mentioned quite a variety of tools that researchers could use that are available on your website. And you mentioned that you were going to give us a link that would enable us to find those tools or access those tools. I'm wondering if there's a description of each of the tools that accompanies the link, because if I set my faculty there, they might see the name of a particular tool but not know its purpose.
Yes. I just sent the link to what we call our Employee Essentials page. I'm going to search and drop one more link in there in a minute. Employee Essentials is kind of what we consider the most popular tool. So we have a service catalog that has, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 tools in there. We're working on it right now, so it's going to go through a lot of changes in the next couple months. But we've pulled out those most popular tools and we've put them on this page. And each thing that we have there has a little brief description that you can click through and get a lot more information about that service. We are also send you a link to our service catalog where you can go through and see all of the services we offer. And again, see that full page description of each service. Like I said, we're in the process of updating our service catalog right now. So we know it's a little bit clunky. We're improving all of that wording. We're writing better descriptions, and you'll see that in place in the next couple of months. Over summer, that's going to launch. It's going to be a lot easier to navigate. But I'll give you both links in the meantime. Links won't change, but the quality of the words on the page will change.
So one thing new that I'll, after Dina had her question here, one thing new I'll say is, starting yesterday, we got a signed HIPAA Business Associates Agreement for Qualtrics. So anybody that has HIPAA data that they're working on within their research project, Qualtrics is now available as a tool for use in HIPAA research projects.
Hi, Brian. Hello, all. This is Dina. And actually, it's what I wanted to clarify, because very often our faculty contact me saying that I'm planning to do this. And is this tool compliant with whatever it needs to be compliant with? And it takes us some time to figure it out. And in the case with Qualtrics, you know that it started actually, or probably started earlier, but one of the catalysts was a faculty member in my college that needed it for her research. So we do appreciate that ITS is working on those compliances, but it will be great to have notification in the catalog. So people who review the information and details will have it up front.
I understand exactly where you're coming from. And Zoom has a HIPAA Business Associates Agreement, as does Microsoft OneDrive. So I think what we need to do is a better job of putting that information out in the public realm so that researchers have an easy place to look to see whether a particular tool can meet the compliance requirements for their research project.
Yep, and I also think that SharePoint has both FERPA and HIPAA compliance. So again,
it does. Yeah, it's all within anything Microsoft. We have just a broad HIPAA Business Associates Agreement for any of the Microsoft services we're using.
This is Bob Reeser again. So, Megan, I saw the second link that you provided, which lists the ITS services. But again, there's quite a variety of services there, and they're not categorized necessarily by research and so on. So I didn't quite catch what you were saying with regard to updating that. So as perhaps to make it easier for someone who's particularly interested in tools that ITS has that would support their research interests to find those. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. And it looks like I'm staring at all kinds of crazy stuff right now because I'm pulling up documents to reference kind of like as I talk through this. I'm looking at our new service catalog, which will launch over this summer. There will be a research specific section of that service catalog where it'll be much more clear what tools you can get to support your research. So right now the categories aren't great. We're working on that, but it'll be much easier to navigate and have better descriptions and just overall improvement to the flow and where you find the information in the next couple of months.
Brian, I had a question. You had talked briefly about some of the security considerations we need to keep in mind when we're working from home as opposed to working at the university in our offices. And one of the things you had mentioned was the presence of other people in the home. Could you elaborate on that a bit? Those kind of hidden potential security things we need to keep in mind?
Yes. So one of the issues that can come up, especially again working with private and protected information, is that there may not be a lot of spaces in the house that are used for remote work. So if you have a spouse or if you have children that are doing online learning, you may all congregate into a common area. And so again, it's important for you to understand the classification of that information, who should be authorized to see it, and how you protect it in a public environment like your home.
One of the things that we have access to is OneDrive. Is that something that we can share private research information over, or do we need to take a different step?
No, again, as we talked about, we have a full contract with Microsoft for services like OneDrive and SharePoint. It's encrypted at rest, it's encrypted in transmission to the Microsoft environment. So there aren't any issues as far as porting that information into that environment, unless there's a contractual obligation not to do that. So for example, I support NIST 800-171, the Department of Defense contract work, and they specifically do not allow you to take information in that environment and put it on general purpose storage. So that would be a no-no. But in most cases, you could use that as a resource, absolutely. I think we did such a good job of educating everybody that everybody's good to go now.
Right? Yeah.
You're all cyber warriors. You all understand how to handle private and protected information, how to protect it, and you're good to go.
Thank you so much, Megan and Brian, for all of this wonderful information. And we'll let you guys get back to your awesome Friday afternoon.